Merci, merci. Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Farida Khelfa, and I'm very happy and honored to be here with you for this Cartier session on Reimagined education. Indeed, we have seen how difficult it has been for our education systems to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic and the lockdowns. 22 million of young girls will not be able to return to school after the pandemic. But we must look at these challenges as a chance to fix our education system, especially when it comes to girls. So, how can we do that? How can we reimagine education? In the next 45 minutes, that is the topic that we are going to discuss. But first, I would like to welcome on stage Her Excellency Delphine O, Ambassador and Secretary General of Generation Equality Forum. Ladies and gentlemen, Her Excellency Delphine O.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much to Expo 2020, to the UAE, and to Cartier for inviting me for this talk. And a special hi to my friend Pumzile, who's hiding in the back of the, of the room, with whom the government of France and Mexico co-chaired the Generation Equality Forum. So as the French ambassador for gender equality and the Secretary General of the Generation Equality Forum, I would like to give you a brief overview of the progress we've made so far in terms of girls' education, the challenges that are remaining, and the work that we're doing so far. Whenever I talk about how much progress we've made since basically the end of the Second World War when it comes to gender equality, I always give the example of education. Today, to give you an example, the primary school completion rate for girls is 90% over the world. That means 90% of girls have actually completed primary school, not just enrolled in primary school, but actually completed primary school. I unfortunately don't have the number of that completion rate 50 years ago, but I'm sure it was about 20 or 30%. Most of the countries have made primary school and secondary school mandatory for girls as well as for boys. But as much progress we've made, it is actually one of the most fragile gains that we have made in terms of gender equality. And this has been said yesterday at the opening ceremony as well as this morning. The COVID crisis actually really made this gain vulnerable. You've heard the number just said by Farida, 20 million girls are at risk, of not returning to school. The actual official number is 11 million girls according to UNESCO, but this 20 million number is the number that is given by the Malala Fund. Surprisingly, or actually when you work, unfortunately, in women's rights, not surprisingly, a number of governments have used the pretense of the crisis to put back in place a number of prohibitions for girls not going to school. For instance, and UN Women knows that very well, certain countries have used the pretense of the COVID crisis and the lockdown to prohibit pregnant girls, adolescent pregnant girls, to go back to school. But it's also not just the governments to blame, it's also societies and families. In many, many countries in the world, after the lockdown is over, we realized that girls who were in school are not returning to school. Why is that? Families have deemed it more profitable to keep them at home, to help with house chores, and many of them, unfortunately, have been forced into early marriage. So why do we need girls' education? Do I need to convince you? I don't think so, but still. 3 reasons why we need girls' education. First, it's obviously just an issue of pure equality and social justice. And also, girls' education has a trickle-down effect on all other aspects of gender equality. On the contrary, whenever you don't educate girls, you create a succession of other harmful practices. When girls don't go to school, they're disproportionately more at risk of undergoing harmful practices such as genital mutilation, such as forced marriages. There's a number of stigma that are still attached to girls going to school. For instance, in many countries in the world, even if it's not legally authorized, communities prevent girls to go to school when they have their menstruation. And for my male friends here in the room, menstruation is a week a month. That is a quarter of your life as a young girl that you cannot attend school. The second reason why we need girls' education is very obvious. In a society where you educate girls, you create more growth, more well-being, more prosperity. I would like to give you the contrary example in a country which I know very well because I worked there, Afghanistan. Everybody knows about the crisis in Afghanistan that happened over the summer, but one of the reasons that Afghanistan is one of the poorest countries in the world is precisely because half of the population has been sidelined in education and then from the workforce. Imagine a society where 50% of your population is not educated and does not work. Of course, you're going to be a poor and underdeveloped country. And when you educate girls, they become CEOs, entrepreneurs, civil servants, astronauts, and everything. And of course, they contribute to the prosperity of society. And last but not least, the third reason why we need girls' education is that it also contributes to a society's resilience, stability, and well-being. And when we talk about our girls' education, of course, we talk about boys' education. A truly gender-equal educational system is not just one where you have girls in school, it's one where you raise girls and boys the same way, and when you actually convey values of equality, of benevolence, of kindness, not one where you transmit values of toxic masculinity. So when we talk about girls' education, we also need to talk about how we educate boys, and this is something that Cyril Vigneron said in the beginning, how you educate boys, also how to treat women. Now that I've said that, what are we doing today? We're doing a lot, and very interestingly, I want to go back to the first panel where my friend from Dile and my friend Cyril talked about how we work today in coalitions, right? In the UN, it's a bit complicated because you have to work with 192 countries, and diplomats in the room know that sometimes you don't get where you want to go. So very interestingly now, you have to work within coalitions, and not just coalitions of government, but also, as has been said, with the private sector, with philanthropies, and with civil society. There are two very important coalitions of which the French government is part of. The first one, which I hope you have heard, is called the Global Partnership for Education. It was launched in 2002. It is the only and most important multi-stakeholder mechanism and funding platform for education in the world. It is a platform that coalesces not only government and international organizations, but also private donors and civil society. And its goal is actually to strengthen educational systems in global south countries to make sure that we get all the boys and all the girls in school and they get a proper education. This fund has been launched almost 20 years ago. It's being regularly replenished, which means in the diplomatic jargon, getting new money in order to fund these initiatives. And France is very proud this year to have announced a new contribution of $333 million. But more importantly, for the first time ever, it has specifically said that half of this money, of this new money, is going to go only to girls' education. And this is very much an improvement and a progress to make sure, thank you, that the new funding for education goes to girls' education, and other countries such as the UK, which is hosting the Global Partnership for Education this year, are following up. The second coalition you might have heard of is the Generation Equality Forum, which was organized by UN Women and co-hosted and co-chaired by the governments of France and Mexico this year, just 4 months ago. We launched 6 coalitions within the Generation Equality Forum. actually none of them tackles education, because all of them tackle education. So we have a coalition on how to combat gender-based violence. We have a coalition on how to empower women economically. We have a coalition on gender and climate. We have a coalition on women's role in innovation and technology. In all of these issues, education is central. This is why we decided we're not going to have a sidelined seventh action coalition on education, because actually education is instrumental to combating gender violence, to empowering women economically, to make sure that women farmers can do resilient agriculture, to make sure that women have their own role and place in technology and innovation. And this is how we organize the Generation Equality Forum, and we made sure that there's an educational component in each of these action coalitions. So I'm going to leave you with that, because I was given 5 minutes, and I'm really, really looking forward to hearing from on-the-ground practices from our panelists. And I really encourage you also to look up the Generation Equality Forum in your respective organizations, and to join our coalitions, and to always be mindful of this idea that you have to educate girls, but also boys, in order to have a really gender equal society. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, Your Excellency. And I'm honored to welcome on stage our guests today, Lynn Kobayashi, Ramla Ali, and Audrey Cheng. Please join me then for the... Have a seat, please. Sit down, yeah? Okay. So thank you to the three of you for joining me. Let me quickly introduce you to our audience. Lynn Kobayashi, you are the school founder and chair of the board of the United World Colleges, ISAC, Japan.
Thank you.
Ramla Ali, oui, bravo. Ramla Ali, you are a professional boxer, a UNICEF ambassador, and you create your own organization, Sisters Club. Finally, Audrey Cheng, you create a computer science school called Moringa School in Kenya. So, do we need to reimagine education, and how can we reimagine education? Let's start with you, Lynn. You have been an education pioneer, and you launched a school to encourage diversity. So what is your story?
Thank you, Farida. Good morning, audience. I don't know if the photo is coming up on the screen, but
don't worry.
Yeah,
don't worry.
Our school that we founded in Japan has about 200 high school students coming from 80 countries in the world. But more importantly, we provide scholarship to about 70% of our students to ensure diversity. And the story why I began this school goes all the way back to my high school days, which is a long time ago. And
where is this?
Yeah, this is in my school, Karuizawa, up in Japan.
In Japan.
Yeah, in Japan. This is the most diverse and very progressive school in Japan. Yeah. And the reason why I got involved in education is that I come from a very ordinary middle-income family or lower-income family in Japan. And I went to a public school and system up until I was 16, and I got fed up with Japanese education, and I applied for a full scholarship to go to a full international boarding school in Canada when I was 16.
Wow.
When I landed in Canada, I spoke no word of English.
Wow.
And because of that, I struggled. I struggled, and because of that, I got very close to friends who were in a similar situation, and became friends with a Mexican girl who was living next door. And she invites me to come to her house in Mexico City in the summer of 1992. That summer changed my life. She lived in a house as big as perhaps this stage, and her house shook every time a truck passed by. And her mother was collecting the water from the roof and doing the laundry with the, what do you call that in English? The washing board?
That board.
Washing board?
Metal board.
Yeah. And I was like, wow. And she looked at me and said, you haven't seen the reality of Mexico. And the relatives took me to a slum area in Mexico City. And I still remember that smell and the scene and everything that I saw in that day. Children were running around without going to school, and adults were just sitting there looking at empty air. And I said to myself, I have to do something about this thing. I have to do. That day, I think I promised myself that I would do something to address this inequality that persists in this world. And that's how I started to get involved in education. And that one scholarship changed my life. And the true diversity that my school offered changed my perspective and made me realize the purpose of my life. And that's why I believe in the power of education.
Yeah,
and the power of diversity. Thank you.
Farida,
Thank you.
Can I just ask a quick question?
Sure.
When you went to Mexico with your friend,
yeah.
how did you interact if you couldn't speak English?
Well, I spoke Spanish.
Okay, well, you missed that bit. You missed that bit.
Off the record. I was dating a Venezuelan boy.
Oh.
Off the record. So, because my son is there, and my husband is Japanese. But it was high school days. We can talk about that.
So, Ramla, when you hear the word education, what does it mean to you? Who were the role models who influenced your perspective on education when you was younger?
I just want to provide a bit of backstory. I was born in Somalia, and I spent most of I grew up in London, so London's the only home that I've ever known. My mum, back in Somalia, was, so in my culture, men are quite controlling, and so her brothers and her father, didn't allow her to go to school, so she can't read and write. And when we came to London, my mum placed...
How old was you, when you came to London?
The thing is, I don't know my real age, because I was born in Somalia during the height of the Civil War, and not a lot of emphasis was placed on, birth certificates, marriage, things like that. So I don't know my age. So I want to guess about 1. But when I came to London, my mum placed a huge emphasis on making sure all of her kids got an education, because she wasn't allowed to do that when she was growing up. When a letter comes home through the mailbox, she would always ask us to read it for her. And obviously, when you're growing up and you're young, you just think to yourself, oh God, Mum, why can't you just read it for yourself? But then you grow up, and in time you realize that's the reason why. So looking back now, I'm so glad that she pushed us all to get an education, because every single one of her kids, so me and all my siblings, we've all graduated university. My brother's a doctor. I've got 2 sisters who are nurses. I have one brother who did a master's in artificial intelligence.
Wow.
Another one who's in university currently. And believe it or not, I have a law degree, which I've never used. But that was because my mum...
you would use it,
that was
don't
just
worry.
because my mum was just so adamant that we were all going to get an education, something that she wasn't necessarily given the opportunity to have when she was growing up. And for me, I just feel like that is my biggest role model.
Yeah.
I know it's really cheesy when people say, oh my God, my mum's my biggest role model. But she's the reason why I feel like I can hold a conversation with people and not feel scared.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that, when I go into the room, I sometimes feel even this, talking in front of everyone is quite, I get a bit nervous, but it's because of my mum that I have the confidence to be up on stage and to talk about such things. So yeah, just big up to my mum.
That's kind of my winning. Thank you. What about you, Audrey? What is your personal story, and what drove you to Kenya?
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, I'm so inspired. I feel like my heart is... Yeah, so I guess my personal story, there is quite a bit of overlap, I think, between all of our stories. So as you can probably tell from my accent, I am American, and so my parents were both born in Taiwan. And so being born in Taiwan, my mom had gone through that education system, and for her, she was also, very clear that for her children, she wanted to raise us in an environment that really fostered like creativity, critical thinking, et cetera. And so when my mom and my dad moved to the US, my dad, I would say, is the smartest person I've ever met. And he is, one of the most highly educated people. And, like growing up, I saw him transition from academia and moving into private sector. And believe it or not, I mean, he really quickly lost his job. And for me, I think just observing that and seeing the values of someone who's so extremely educated, but not able to hold a job, it really made me question from a young age, what are we learning in school? And going through the school system, I was like, what am I learning today that's actually helping me get ready for the future? And so having gone through the school system, I think I was probably one of the biggest rebels. I would always think that the best education that happened was outside of campus, right? It was never actually on campus. It was in the work. It was in the collaboration with my peers. And very quickly, I think I realized that on a global scale, how massive that inequality is. And so when I moved to Kenya, I moved in 2014 to work in venture capital. So, I wanted to invest in early stage tech companies across the continent, support local entrepreneurs, build their capacity through education and investment, and really help grow economies that way. And very quickly, I realized that they really, really struggle to find ready to hire talent. And so we know that in Africa, 1 in 5 people on Earth by 2050 will be African. Right, that is massive.
Whoa.
Yeah, and that population is growing. Yeah, believe it or not. And so I think just thinking about that, it can be both an opportunity, right? But it can also be such a massive challenge for the whole world unless we learn how we can truly educate girls and boys through not just access to education, but truly access to quality education. And so that's essentially how I started Moringa.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. So this brings us to our next question. Whose responsibility is to build a better education system? Is it the responsibility only of school and academia, or should we all feel responsible? So, and for girls especially, how can we make sure that they have access to an education that makes them become more self-confident, that empower them and help them fulfill their dream and potential? So how do you think we can do that?
Thank you. Perhaps let me share a story how we made a change ourselves, and then perhaps talk about
how did you make the change yourself? Exactly.
So usually private schools are founded by a very wealthy individual or a renowned foundation. But our school was founded by 100 individuals in Japan who believed in our mission and who believed in the importance of progressive education and diverse education in Japan. I must have met about 2,500 people before I reached 100 founders who could each contribute about $100,000 or above.
Wow.
And it took us 4 years to reach our goal of $15 million. Today, this has actually become a movement. We have over 1,000 people, individuals and corporate supporters, raising about $65 million over decades. And I'm just sharing this example just to show that time has changed. Now the social changes are made on the ground, and I think we are all sort of testimony of that. And when we used to speak about education, we used to complain about the schools or complain about government policies or look to the international organization to do something about it. But now it's up to us, I think. With the rise of social media, anyone can become an influencer. And each and every one of us can make a change.
True.
And I think that's what I learned throughout my journey.
Right,
I hope
thank
that
you very
answers the
much.
question.
Yeah. What about you, Audrey? How do you think we can improve education system?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think in education systems, I think representation is extremely important. And so when we started Moringa School, our aim was to train 200,000 knowledge workers through market-driven education in emerging markets by 2030. So it was an ambitious goal, and we knew that we needed to really involve like all sectors, right? So being focused on technology education meant that we were really at the center of where the world is heading, and so we had to work with governments, right? With our team, we knew we had to build a very diverse team in order to accomplish that goal. So our team currently is about over 110 people, and we have team members from all across the African continent. So we're really well represented to really make sure that when we train these wonderful students, and this is one of our graduating classes in Rwanda, is that when we train these students, we need to make sure that who they look up to is someone that they aspire to be like. And so on the right was one of our country directors, right? And really making sure that when these students see the people leading and growing these institutions, they realize that they can be like that too. And so we've had from one of our first classes was this woman named Diana, and she was only a secondary school graduate actually. And so being a secondary school graduate, and we were just talking about this, it's hard to feel like you can actually get a real formal job afterwards. And so as she was going through her program, on the very few last weeks, she was asking me how, am I really going to be able to find a job? Everyone's telling me I can't. And very quickly, within a week, before graduation, she ended up getting five job offers, right? Some of the top tech companies in Kenya. We've gotten students in roles at Microsoft, right, and really transformed their lives, their communities. And we found that a lot of our female students actually, they'll sponsor their siblings to actually go through our education as well. And so it's just an extremely powerful ripple effect. So anytime we invest in one student, when government sees that and really supports those initiatives, when funders do as well, and when people on the ground are building incredible initiatives like Moringa and elsewhere across the continent, that can really change individual lives.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah. Thank you. They look indeed, they look radiant. Really. Yeah.
They look happy.
Yeah, really happy.
We were just talking earlier that a lot of emphasis is placed on education in Africa because it's not easily accessible to everyone. So those are just faces that are just so happy.
Yeah. So, Ramla, can you share with us your association, Sisters Club? What is it exactly?
So back in 2018, I decided to, so I'm just going to give a little bit of backstory on Sisters Club, sorry.
Explain the whole story.
Back in 2018, I decided, I wanted to do something more with my time. I remember reading a quote from the great Muhammad Ali that said, he wants to be remembered for what he did in the ring, but more than that, he wants to be remembered for what he did outside of the ring. And that's essentially what I wanted to do. So I decided to volunteer an hour of my time a week to teach vulnerable women, religious minorities, ethnic minorities, just these group of women that just find it really hard to get access to sport, to gain access to sport. So then created Sisters Club. So it's just a free weekly self-defense class for women.
Great. So they learn how to box, all of them.
But more than anything, they learn how to box in a safe environment, free of men. Because a lot of the women that turn up are women, who wear a hijab and who are quite religious. This one is actually my sister.
Oh, really? Wow.
So since 2018, Sisters Club has grown massively. And that we've, my one small little weekly class has now turned into 4 different locations in London, because I feel like these women, these vulnerable women, are not just in one area of London. They're all over London. And I just wanted to provide them more opportunities to go to these classes and to feel safe and to learn how to box, learn how to defend themselves. In 2018, there was this huge uprising of violence against women. A lot of the women who turn up as well are women who've suffered from domestic violence and domestic abuse. And over time, you hear these amazing stories of these women that say, I feel safe to be in my home, or I feel safe to walk alone at night. And that is the initial reason why I started Sisters Club. So to hear, you know, these women, to get that sort of feedback from these women just makes you realize that you've done your job right.
And it's every kind of age. You have a lot of
Every
different.
age.
Yeah.
I think the youngest, I mean, her daughter comes to Sisters Club and she is 14.
Good.
14. She's 14. So it's any age. I mean, obviously not too young, but any woman, you know, like I said, it's targeted at these women specifically, but it's not to say that no one, like certain groups aren't allowed to come. So Sisters Club is open to any woman.
And do they come by word of mouth? Or?
Yeah, so we've set up an Instagram account. She now actually helps me. She actually helps me run. She's got her own little phone with different WhatsApp groups. People book in through her. We're setting up a website through the helping of like amazing sponsors such as Nike and Sports Direct. And it's just growing. And my aim is to not only have it in London, expand in England, but then expand in North America, South America, and possibly all over the world, because I just feel like these vulnerable groups are not just in one place, they're everywhere.
But they learn how to box or self-defense.
Yeah, so they
how
learn
to box.
So it's not like it's not like a boxercise class where you just coming to sweat for a bit. Like, you're actually learning. So all the coaches that I've hired have been like thoroughly vetted by me. So I used to train with her, so I know she knows how to teach properly. I don't want somebody to just come and say throw 20 punches. Like she's teaching the art of boxing. She's teaching the women how to learn how to box and how to defend themselves at the same time, and that is why the Sisters Club was created.
My last question, is this your last name?
Huh?
Your last name, your name is Ramla Ali.
Yeah.
Does it have something to do with Muhammad Ali?
I would.
You know, think about it. I mean,
people ask me online, has it something to do with? So I just go along with it, because if more people can come and watch women. Okay, so that's another. Sorry, I know I'm talking a lot. If more people could come and watch women box, it would be amazing, because there is a huge pay gap between men and women in the sport, probably the highest in any sport. And I feel like a lot of it has something to do with the demand for women. So if more people could come and watch women box, it would mean that women could finally get the same level of pay as men. So if somebody said, oh, is that Muhammad Ali's granddaughter? Just go along with it, because it means that they'll come and watch you box.
So let's say you're his spiritual daughter.
Let this just stay in the room.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you very much, all of you, Ramla, Lynn, and Audrey. We are now at the end of this conversation, and it was really inspiring and interesting to hear all of your story. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you.